In this series of lessons, we'll be looking at programming Visual FoxPro. We're going to start with the basics, how to create a program file, revisit creating variables. We'll be looking at how to set up testing conditions, formerly known as branching, is where we use if, then, else statements, and also a look at looping. Thereafter, we'll go on to working with forms and applying some of the constructs that we've learned here. And of course, concepts will ultimately evolve out of the exercises that we'll be doing. So let's go right ahead and begin. Now, a program, of course, is just a sequence of instructions for the computer to carry out some specific task. In Visual FoxPro, we create a program by using the command modify command, and of course then we specify the name of our new program file. So I'm going to call this one my first, and before I do that, I keep forgetting to set my default folder. So let's go ahead and set default to question mark here, and then navigate to my folder, tutorial, and it seems like we're still in lesson 1. Let's create a new folder. In fact, no, but there's some tables in here that I want to use. Okay, so we go. So we're now lesson 1. If I print full path, current directory. Remember, just typing the first 4 characters of or first 4 letters of a command usually is sufficient. And with the latest version of Visual FoxPro, version 8, version 7 as well, Visual FoxPro will expand this for you. That is, IntelliSense is expanding it for me, and then I can see that I'm in my desired path. So I want to create a program file called my first. And given that we have the command window, and we can enter commands directly into the command window and have Visual FoxPro carry them out, to create a program file, I should say it's no surprise that to create a program file we use the modify command, and we just put modi for short, modi.com command, and then my first as the name of the file, and by default Visual FoxPro will create a myfirst.prg file. Visual FoxPro programs have a default extension of PRG, and so within your program file you can go ahead and enter any command that you would normally enter in the command window. So what I'm going to do here is if you're a C programmer, you'll know that famous Hello World program by Kernighan and Ritchie. So I'm going to do that here. First off, I want to point out that to enter comments in your program file, we can use the asterisk. So use asterisk to enter comments. We could also use ampersand, use double ampersand at the end of a line for comments. And we could also use the word note. Note, the note keyword also allows us to enter comments. Okay, and of course, it's always a good thing to enter comments in your program. So what we'll say is this is my first VFP program. And what we want to do first off is to clear the Visual FoxPro desktop. So I'll type the clear command, and I could put a comment here. I'm going overboard now. Normally I don't comment this heavily. So we'll say clear VFP desktop, and then we want to print hello world to the screen. And for that I'll use the question mark and close quotes, open quotes, and I'll say hello world. And there we have our program. Click here to close, or I could just save and then close. or press Control W or Control Enter to save. And then now to execute your program, you use the do command from the command window. So it's do my first, press Enter key, and my spelling is off. So it's not do my first, but do my first. So watch out for those spelling errors. Okay, so Enter key, and Visual FoxPro went ahead and executed my command. Notice that none of the comments were displayed to the screen. They are ignored. They're there for other programmers to read what you intended to do in the case you do something very cryptic that no one else would readily understand. And so the only executable commands are these two lines, clear, and the question sign, of course, which means to print. And so this is your first, our first Visual FoxPro program. And again, our program is made up of statements, comments, statement to clear the screen, a statement to display something to our screen. So let's keep coding. What we're going to do next is to let's create another program, body command my first two. And here now, I want to demonstrate working with variables. And so instead of just printing hello world to the screen as we did, I'm going to store that in a variable. Now to create a variable in Visual FoxPro, we simply type the name and assign it a value. One of the things you'll commonly see is local, let's say myvar, whatever name I want to call it, and I could declare my variable if I wish to before assigning it a value. It's not mandatory, but it is good practice. And I'll just say myvar, local myvar, and then I'll assign the value myvar is equal to hello world. I'll change the name to var msg. Notice that Visual FoxPro is not case sensitive, so if I did this, it's quite alright. Then I go ahead and tell Visual FoxPro now to print the contents of my variable. Of course, we want to be sure to clear the screen, so we type clear there, and I'm pressing Control Enter. You will not see this, and that will save and close the edit window, and then I can go ahead and run my other program, do my first two, and of course the results are the same, or is the same. Okay, so that's variable. Of course, we've looked at that there are different types of variables. There are date types, there are numeric types, date time, integers, and a whole host of other variable types that we will come across as we continue our journey into this wonderful world of programming Visual FoxPro. Okay, so what else is on our list? Let's go back up here. And so we know now how to create a program file. We did a quick review of creating a variable. And so what I want to do is to show you how to test conditions in Visual FoxPro. So what we're going to do is write another simple program called my first three, and I want to test that if today is New Year's Day, we'll print Happy New Year's. So let's clear the screen again, and to do that we use the if statement, which is almost universal. I think every programming language have an if command or if statement. So it's if, and then of course we specify the expression that needs to be tested, and I want to test the date. So I want to test the current date, that is the system date, and I use the date function. Functions have, when I'm calling a function, it must end with parentheses, open and close parentheses, and Visual FoxPro know that this is a function. In fact, it is a keyword and that Visual FoxPro knows, so therefore it's in blue. Okay, that is the built-in function. It's not one that I wrote for myself. So if current date is equal to, and this is how you specify date in VFP. It's kind of cryptic, and I'll explain this some other time. So it's 2007 01-01, and we use the curly brace. So we use curly braces to represent date. This is strict date formatting. In the older days, we didn't have to do all this. We didn't have to use the caret. We just used the curly braces. Now we have to put the caret there, and we specify the year first, then the month, and then the day. Close curly brace. For you Visual Basic programmers, you can put then if you wish to. Because I often switch between the two languages, I've made it a habit of using then in VFP so that when I switch back to Visual Basic, I don't forget to put the then, which was happening. It's up to you. You can leave it there or not. I think I'm going to put it in just for completeness. So if current system date is equal to 2007 January 1 or January 1 2007, then print the message, and notice we indent Happy New Year. Else, I'm going to say if the condition fails, if it's not New Year's Day, then print bummer. Bummer. It's only, and I'll print what day it is. And so for that, I'll put I'll use this function CDOW, the day of the week, and I'll pass in the date function, and that should give us the day of the week. And then of course we end the statement with an end if. So for every if block you must have an end if. The else portion, of course, is optional. In other words, I could have only this. If it's New Year's Day, print a message. Otherwise, it would do nothing, and our program would run, would not see a message on the screen, which would not be very polite. So therefore, we put an else in here to indicate that the condition failed, and therefore we get another message in its place. So we're going to go ahead and press Control Enter here, save and close. I'm going to go ahead now and run this and see what we get. And here's the message: bummer, it's only Friday. So Visual FoxPro, I want to point out, has a host of functions for working with dates and times, so that we don't have to do calculation. I don't have to guess what day today is. I just ask Visual FoxPro using one of its many functions to figure out what day of the week it is. And of course, if I wanted that to be Friday, to be in sync with the rest of the message, you notice everything else is in uppercase and Friday is in proper form, I could use the upper function. And notice that I can embed functions within other function calls. So I first call the function date, which has its own set of brackets. Then I call CDOW, right, and with its own set of brackets, and then I call upper. So convert the result of all of that to uppercase. And so if we were to run this again, we'll see now that everything looks a bit consistent. Bummer, it's only Friday. Okay, so that is how we build a conditional statement in Visual FoxPro. And of course, we don't have to test dates only. You can test numeric values. However, the expression itself will evaluate to a logical value. It will either evaluate to true or it will evaluate to false. Okay. Of course, this is just an overview, a quick overview. As we progress and we start building forms and doing other stuff, you'll see these commands repeatedly and get a better sense and a better understanding of how they're used or can be used in developing real-world applications. Now, the next thing I want to go on to is, so we've looked at branching, is looping. And this one will be a little bit more extensive. Actually, before I go on to looping, there is another mechanism for testing in VFP that we can use, and it's called, in fact, there are several. But I'm going to just touch on the do case right now. If you're a VB programmer, it's the same as select case, etc. Select case I, and you'd say case 1, do something, so forth. It's a little similar to that. That's that's VB. It's not quite the same in VFP. If you're a C programmer, you use a switch statement, and so forth. In VFP, we use do case, and you'll find that VFP's rendition of this command is a lot more flexible because I can test a whole set of unrelated variables in my case. I can say if I is equal to 2, case J is equal to B, and so forth. And Visual FoxPro will go through and test each condition, and whichever is true then will cause the code beneath my immediate case statement to be executed. In fact, let's go ahead and do an example. So discard changes, yes. So we're going to create a new program called my first number 4. Clear our screen, and we'll do case, and we'll repeat this one. If date is equal to, I'll just do a little shortcut here. So I can create a date type by using the date function itself, passing in values for year, month, and day, and it will create a date for me. So if the current system date, which this is what it returns if I don't pass a value in the brackets, it will return the current date. If the current date is equal to this date, year 2007, January 1, then I can print the message here, Happy New Year. Or I could test something else. What else could we do here now? Let's see. I can test and see if today is Friday. We can say, yippee, it's TGIF. So I'll use the character day of the week function, CDOW, and I'll enter today's current system date, and I'll say if it's equal to Friday, and print the message. Okay, so I've gone ahead and entered a few more conditions, and the last one is the one I wanted to point out to you specifically, is that if none of these are true, if it's not the New Year's, if it's not Friday, if it's not Monday, then the system will go and execute this one. There's no condition for this one. This one says if everybody else fails, then do this. Of course, the message here may not be true because I then need to check for Sunday and Saturday for it to be true. But it's quite sufficient now for this example. So we'll clear screen. we check if it's New Year's Day, if it's Friday, if it's Monday, and what we can more appropriately say is, oh, it's just, and then we can of course put the using a plus sign, the current day of the week, which is whatever it happens to be. And we want to put this in uppercase to match the rest of our text. And so this is the longest program we've written. So it's do case, and if it's a case where this is a condition here, where the system date returned by date is equal to New Year's Day, which is the date function again, but I'm passing in now a specific date, then print this message. I don't need any break, as in C. The next case statement indicates a break, and so we go on to the next one. If the current day of the week is Friday, then print this message. If it's Monday, print this message. It's Monday. Otherwise, we'll print, oh, it's just whatever date happens to be. So we'll go ahead, save our changes, and we'll do my first 4. And of course, we'll get hooray, thank God, it's Friday. None of the other conditions will be executed. Once one is found that is true, then Visual FoxPro will jump out. Okay, so we have the if statement, as we saw here. And of course, then we have the do case. Do case. If we have multiple conditions that we want to check in sequence to see which is true, and then to take some appropriate action. Okay, so let's close that, and we go back up. And of course, now finally, we want to take a look at looping. Okay, now in VFP there are several looping constructs, and I'm just going to put it down here. So we've got the familiar for next loop. We have that in VB and most other languages, C# and the rest of those new stuff as well. We have for in C and C++, though it's a little uglier there. We can end the for with either the next or and for, right, if you prefer. There is for each as well, which I've not used too much, but it's for each, next, and then we have do while, and scan, and scan. So I want to briefly, or very quickly, look at these. I'm going to leave out the for each for another time. I'm just going to quickly look at the for next, do while, and scan, and scan. So loops, of course, or iterators, or not iterators, sorry. Loops allow us to iterate specific commands a number of times. I may have specific pieces of code that I'd like my computer to execute a set number of times, or until some condition becomes true or false, and then to stop and then move on to something else. And so what we're looking at today is just constructs, how to construct these in Visual FoxPro. So what we're going to do is the next program, modicum, my first number 5, and we're going to look at the for loop. And so what we're going to do is to create a variable. We'll say j is equal to 4, and I'll say for j equal. In fact, I didn't need to create j there. J is created when I use the for. So we're looking at variables. For j equal, j will be assigned the first value of 1, and I say 1 to 10. Let's go up to 10. Of course, I could specify a step here, step 2. So I would get every other number. By default, if you don't specify a step, the step is 1. I'm going to leave step out for now. And so we're going to print the values on the screen. So what we'll do is print the message step, and I want the value of j. So I'm going to convert j to a character type, because anything enclosed in quotes is treated as a character or string. And so I'll convert j to a string by using the string command. Actually, my favorite command to use for this is actually transform. And transform j. It does a better job than string. Okay, and you can actually, if you want to, experiment and see what the difference is if I were to use string j as opposed to transform j. So you can do that as an exercise. And at the end of the loop, we want the message blast off. Okay, so of course, let's clear the screen here. And I'm just going to go right ahead and execute this program. I could do that by clicking on this button here if you have it. If you notice the Control plus E there is another shortcut. If the menu bar is not here, I could simply press Control E to save and execute the program. So I'm just going to go right ahead and say yes, and go ahead and execute it. It didn't close my window though, so I closed the window. And so when the program runs through, starting with the value of j, step 1, 2, 3, 4, right up to 10, and at the end, let's actually open the code here so you can see what's going on. So notice I write the step message once, and I put the value of j there for each iteration. So the computer starts here. J is assigned the value of 1. Then it prints. It does this. Whatever is between the 4 and next is executed this many times. And so we go through, we print, we execute this once. Next, then increments the value of j. J becomes 2. Starts all over again. Goes up here, prints this message, comes down to next, increments the value of j, and keeps going on and on and on. Some people prefer to put next j here. It's not mandatory, but you can do that for documentation purposes. And at the end, once j becomes greater than 10, when j exceeds the value here that we've specified, then the loop ends, and then the next statement is evaluated. And if we had more statements going down and down and down, rather, then Visual FoxPro would attempt to execute these. Of course, D is not a valid command, and so we would have gotten some errors there. So that's the for loop. I'm just going to quickly show you what a step. I'll put step 2 and see what happens. Let's run this. I just press Control E, and now we got 1, 3, 5, 7. We get only odd numbers. Okay. So let's try to construct the same using the do while. Okay, so let's not close this one. Let's create a new program. Clear the screen. We'll set j to be equal to, so to create a variable, of course, you just specify a name, assign it a value. And we'll say j is equal to 1. We can say do while j is less than less than 11. Okay? Or we could specify it this way, less than or equal to 10. Alright. Go ahead, print countdown. Let's go back step. Of course. Let's use string here so you can see the difference. And in this loop, I now have to increment j myself. So I said, take the old value of j, add 1 to it, and then store it back into j. So j is equal to j plus 1. So let's put a comment there. Increment j by 1. Of course, we put an end and do. Okay, and of course the final message blast off. Okay. There are no step commands in here. You would control the step by incrementing instead of by 1, by 2, 3, 4, whatever the value you wish. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this now. I'll put it over here so we can see what's happening. And there we go. If you notice the difference with the string, when str function, which is short for string, converts the value j to a string, it puts some spaces before it. So that is why I use the trans or transform as opposed to the string. In order to achieve the same as the transform, I can of course do a left trim. I tend to use alt trim. I can't bother to figure out which one it is. So I trim the value, and of course if I run again, Control E, I'll get it looking similar to our earlier example. So that's the do while. Of course we can also iterate through tables, which is what our next examples will show. And what I want to do is to open up, and I'm going to open, let's go with my table 1. Let's browse that. We've got 6 records in here, and we know some information about the people in our table. For example, we know that this person, Cameron, he likes coffee. Doom likes coffee. Polychronis does not. Maxfield does, and Parker does not. Bond, we don't know, but because this is a logical type, blank is the same as false, because you can have only 2 values with a logical type. If a value is not specified, the computer assumes false. Actually, the default value is false. So let's iterate through this table using loops, and we'll go to my first 7, and I want to show this using the do while command. So we'll clear the screen. We'll put some comments here. This program iterates through all the records, and my table 1 PDF file prints and prints a message. Okay. So we again clear the screen. What we would do in most cases, instead of opening the table manually, I would include commands within the code to open the table. So we'll go and say use, so open the table, and say use my table 1. Make sure I'm using that shared. And then I would say go top. By default though, when you open a table for the first time, it is on the topmost record. So you don't really need to do this, but just for completeness I'll do it. So this ensures that we're on the very first record. Okay, so start at the top, and then we'll say do while, and so do while not EOF. Now this function says while we're not at the end of the my table 1 file, do whatever I'm going to put here. So let's end do here. So this is a loop, and we'll put stuff in here. And so while it's not the end of the file, do whatever is between the loop body or the loop block. So what we want to do is we want to first check to see if a guy likes, or whoever it is, likes coffee or no. And we're going to print a message saying Jane likes coffee, Jane does not like coffee. So if likes coffee, and of course we're testing here the field, so let's browse to make sure we have the proper name of the field. Okay, so it's likes, C-O-F-F-E. Again, the other E is missing because in a free table the maximum length of a column is 10 characters. So likes coffee. So if likes coffee, we could put equal dot t dot here for true, but because the if statement naturally evaluates to a logical condition and our variable is logical, we don't need to. So we could just make it a bit more natural and say, if likes coffee, then I'm going to print on the screen the name of the person, so whatever their first name is, or let's put their full name. So I'll put F name. Let's trim F name plus space, and then we're going to trim their last name as well. And then I want to put likes coffee. Else, of course, I'll go back up here, copy this. Does not care much for coffee. Okay, so let's open this window a little wider, see what's going on here. So we're looking at this example is showing us a bunch of stuff that we've seen earlier. So we're using the if-else condition. So if the current record we're on, we're looking at the column likes coffee, which would happen to be this column. We're going to just scroll down and look at every record. If likes coffee, then we print the name, F name, whoever it is, F name plus the last name, and then we add to that likes coffee. Otherwise, we print their name, does not care much for coffee. Okay? And okay, so we'll close this. And we're also going to close the table. And what we need to do now is to, given that we're on the go top ensures that we're on the first record, we say do on not end of file, and what we want to do is to skip, so go to next record. Okay, so we need to manually put a skip if we're using the do while construct, the do while looping mechanism. Okay, and I can just put in a message here, end of file reached. All this is just for demonstration purposes. You would not literally put this in a real-world application. So let's go ahead. I'm going to press Control Enter to close this, and I'm just going to execute to my first. There is another way to call a program. We could just simply type the name of the program, my first 7, put brackets there, and Visual FoxPro would know that it's would eventually find it. It would search for it and find it. So we can do that. And here I have an error. Command contained unrecognized phrase. I think it might be trim. Let's rtrim. Rtrim and rtrim. Oh, actually that wasn't the problem. I think it's that I'm using mixed quotes. So I have single quotes here, a single quote here, and a double quote here, which does not work. So the only time I can mix them is if I wish to have a single quote or a double quote actually printed to the screen. So I need to match that. So we'll close this again, Control Enter, run the program, and whoa, okay, that was a lot of information. So it goes through, starting at the top, and it says Jimmy Cameron likes coffee. Randy Doom likes coffee. Mary Polychronis does not care much for coffee. George Maxfield likes coffee. David Parker does not care much for coffee. And of course, James Bond does not care much for coffee. Again, that happened because the default value for logical type is false. Though we don't have an F here, it's empty, it defaults to false. So what you've just seen is that using loops, we start from, using a loop construct, we start from the top of the table, and we examine every record in turn, looking at some column and displaying information and taking some action. If he likes coffee, then we say he does. If he doesn't, then we take the appropriate action. I'm going to just rewrite this very quickly using the final looping construct, scanned scan and scan. So we've looked at for next. We'll look at the for each at another time. And we looked at do while, and now we look at the scan. Scan is one of my all-time favorite commands. In the early days, let's go back to Modi command 7. Open this. I want to save this as another version, so I'll go here, File, Save As, and I'll just change the name to number 8. So I have the original copy, and then I'll just modify this one. And I was saying that scan is one of my all-time favorite commands. When it was discovered, when I discovered it, I didn't have to use constructs such as these. A common mistake I would make is to forget to put the skip in this program. And if I comment the skip out, what would happen is that when I run, that's clear, if I were to do my first 8, we're going to end up with an infinite loop. And so it just keeps going on. Jimmy likes coffee, Jimmy Cameron likes coffee, Jimmy, and you wonder what's going on. What is happening is that it's not skipping, it's not looping. It's on the first record, and because there's no skip, it just keeps checking the first record. And escape should cause a break in the command. No? Okay, escape is not escaping. So I'll go to program. Oh, don't tell me I have set escape off. Oh dear. Okay. Okay. I had to use some brute force to stop that program. That was a program out of control. So let's go ahead and open it again, which is why scan and scan became my all-time favorite. Now, where is that? My first 8. So without a skip in there, we end up with an infinite loop, and it just goes on and on and on, never getting to the end of file. Okay, so we want to make sure the skip is in there. So what we're going to do is change this, and we'll use this, and we're going to just change this to scan, and we'll change this to end scan. Now scan does most of that for me. When you use the scan command, what it will do first off is position the record pointer to the first record. So there's an implicit go top in a scan command. Right, so you notice I took out the go top. I don't need it with a scan. Here, regardless of where my record pointer is, if it was at the bottom, once I say scan, it starts on the top and goes to the bottom. Also, in the scan, I don't need a skip. An end scan automatically skips to the next record for me. So with the scan command, I've already eliminated 2 additional commands. So I'll get the same results here. Use a table, start from the top, check, and print the appropriate messages, but I don't have to remember to put a skip in there. Whew. Okay, so let's go ahead and run my first 8. And voila. Okay, so to review, we've looked at how to create a program file. Program files in Visual FoxPro have a PRG extension by default, and in fact, when we run our programs, Visual FoxPro will compile them into a FoxPro executable file. It doesn't actually run the PRG; it runs an FXP file, which is a FoxPro executable file. So you'll notice that I have 2 copies of my first, the actual source code, which is human readable, and then this you can take a whack at it if you like, is more machine readable. So for every program I write, once I execute it, Visual FoxPro will create a new FXP. If I make modifications, of course it checks and deletes the old one and recreates a new one for me. When I make changes to my program, Visual FoxPro, of course, automatically creates a BAK file, which is the old copy of the program prior to my changes. We've looked at creating variables, simply specifying a name and assigning a value to it. We briefly looked at the local command. I'll get back to that when we talk more about variable scoping. and we looked at conditional constructs using if-then, using the do case, and also we looked at loops using for next or for and for. We looked at the do while loop, and of course my all-time favorite, the scan end scan.